Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace. Have an up and coming, very talented writer. I've been trying to get him on the show for a while. We're just talking about it. Glad to finally welcome Morgan Hampton to the show. Morgan, thanks for taking the time.
Man, thank you for having me. I'm glad we could work this out. Yeah, it's been like a 2-year journey of us
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
run
something
the show.
like
So
that.
yeah,
Yeah, and for those longtime listeners of the podcast, you'd be like, why does that name sound familiar? We covered a Cyborg series in our DC Spotlight every time it came out. We absolutely loved it. But we're here today to follow up on, I guess, the conversation we had yesterday, kind of a Star Trek State of the Union for 2024 with Christopher Cantwell, Colin Kelly, and Jackson Lansing. Kind of a series that it spun out of what's going on in the main Star Trek two titles, Defiant and Star Trek. We have a four-issue mini that actually finishes up next week. Issue 4 comes out next week, July 3rd. It's written by Morgan. It's called Sons of Star Trek, and it goes hand in hand with a lot of the things that the guys were saying yesterday about so much of the story that's happening right now in Star Trek is about fathers and sons. So let's start off, Morgan, with you giving a little bit of the elevator pitch of the series for any of our listeners, any of our audience that's not familiar. Give them an idea of what the series is about.
yeah, it's very much like you just said, fathers and sons, and I wanted to take that to the extreme because it's Star Trek. So I took these existential children of Star Trek legends and like pop them into another universe where they kind of have to deal with very specific needs that they have not been able to work out, kind of within the context of the conflict of this alternate universe that they're in right now. So it's very much about just like growing pains, but I wanted to explore what growing pains look like in the future in kind of the Star Trek galaxy when we kind of live in such a Star Trek is like a hopeful future, right? But like people still have internal struggles that they have to go through. And I feel like having characters from Star Trek that are kind of like almost like side characters that we don't get to see too much of very often, it was really important to kind of explore the depths of what these characters were going through because we don't really get to spend that much time with them.
Yeah, fascinating the way you talk about this hopeful future. The way the guys put it yesterday was this utopia, but it doesn't mean it's utopia for everybody. We talked about
Right.
that a lot, and these young men in this story certainly, they all have their challenges. They all have their things that, as you said, that they need to overcome. So I want to get a little bit deeper into the story, but I think before we do that, you're so much younger than any of the other three we had yesterday. Younger than myself, certainly closer to that idea of trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life, which is kind of one of the challenges that these guys are going through. But also, you weren't of a generation where when Star Trek first started, like your entire life, Star Trek has existed. As opposed to myself and the other three guys, it was like reruns of the '60s show, but there
Yeah.
was no Star Trek really, and not any new stuff. Maybe the movies once in a while, but until Next Gen came around in '89. So uh, do you remember when you first discovered Star Trek or when you started to become a fan? Can you give us kind of your
Yeah.
backstory with this project?
I'll start by saying I'm older than I look. I'm still young, but I am older than I look. People always get freaked out when I'm like, I'm 31, for example. People are like, you're 31? But yeah, my dad is a big Trekkie.
Okay.
And I grew up more of a Star Wars person. Not on some like competitive stuff. I don't know, I gravitated more towards Star Wars. But he was always trying to get me into it. And I'd say when I was young, the J.J. Abrams movies were coming out. Like I was in
Okay.
high school around that time, so I kind of got into it there. And I had seen some original series stuff as well. Um, but it wasn't until COVID, honestly. So I'm kind of a new Trekkie. When COVID hit and I was kind of stuck at home for like 7 months, I just watched everything, like every episode of every show, every movie. I have a stationary bike, so I would get on that and I would just watch Star Trek all day and bike. And I fell in love with the franchise, and I was like, now I see what my dad was talking about. So that gave us kind of a thing to bond over as well, because he's from that generation. Like he was 6 or 7 when the original series came out, so he really grew up with Star Trek, and then he was like skeptical when the Next Generation came out. He was like, they're going to mess Star Trek up. And then he became a fan all over again. So yeah, it's definitely started with my dad. It took a while for me to actually get into it, but now I'm here and hope to be here for a while because I love Star Trek so much.
That is a great origin story. And so what I love is coming into it at that point, right? Like after you've already, I want to be a writer, I want to be a storyteller as my career. And then, watching Star Trek at that time was kind of that mindset in the back of your mind. One of the things guys were talking about yesterday, it's always character first. Like all
Yeah.
the science fiction stuff and all the action and special effects, whatever, that's the frosting on the cake.
Yeah.
But you need the foundation, you need the cake, and the cake is the character. Was that something that's kind of as you became immersed during this time that you kind of gravitated, that you think that's where your kind of love and oh my God, this is really good stuff? Is that kind of where it comes from?
Absolutely. I think with sci-fi and a lot of just like genre specific stuff, it's almost like you said, the icing on top, but it's like the sugar that helps you swallow the pill a little bit. Like there's a lesson always within that. There's something deeper going on with these characters. And yeah, it's cool to see it, packaged in a particular way. But I think Star Trek, yeah, it absolutely does the character focused stuff really well. And that's something that I definitely like recognize. Like there's, especially just going back to the original series, there's deep lessons in every single one of those episodes. And it's just like, if you're paying attention, it's there. And sometimes, when it comes to like fandom and stuff, people don't necessarily see that. And they're like, oh, Star Trek's going woke. And I'm like, Star Trek's been woke since 1966,
Exactly.
like since it came out. That's the definition of Star Trek. So yeah, I definitely think that was a big thing for me as well.
Yeah, if you don't think Star Trek was kind of forward thinking and Roddenberry is very much a progressive, you're living with your head in the sand. I mean,
Yeah.
it was always that way. So from being aware of it to falling in love with it, how does that transition then have to getting the opportunity to do this series with IDW?
Yeah.
You pitched something to them. Did they approach you? How did that come about?
I got very lucky. I met Jackson landing at Comic-Con 2 years ago. Around the time I met you. I think I met
Mhm.
you at WonderCon that year.
Yeah.
I met him at Comic-Con. Just, I just completed the milestone initiative, so we just started talking. Me, him, and my friend Dorado we all live in the same area, so we started hanging out once a month. Just like he would give us, guidance and stuff like that. And it was around the time that his Star Trek series was about to start, and I think it might have been before the announcement came out. So he told me a little bit about it and how like it was going to be Sisko centric, and I was like, I can't wait. Sisko's my favorite character. All that type of stuff. So we talked, and then we started getting into like, what were some of your favorite episodes? And then I started talking about, so I'm a big Deep Space Nine guy. That's my favorite show,
Mhm.
Star Trek show. Started talking about a particular episode that was like Jake centric. Um, and I guess I went on this long 15-minute tangent about how much I like Jake, because I think Jake and Sisko's relationship mirrors mine and my own father's relationship. Like my dad was a career Marine, and I did not follow in his footsteps. I became a writer, kind of same as Jake.
Yeah,
He didn't
that's cool.
become a writer, so like I kind of feel like a kinship with Jake, so to speak, because it's like that's just me and my dad in the 24th century, so to speak. So I guess I kind of did that, and I wasn't even like trying to pitch or anything. It was just, I guess, the passion behind it. And Jackson was like, if the Star Trek series ends up being successful, we're going to probably spin out into some books. Like if you'd like to do one of those, like I'll put your name in the hat. And I was like, I just thought he was being nice, because at this point I hadn't even got Cyborg yet.
Hmm.
This was before that, so I was just like, yeah, I would love it, thinking he would just be nice. And then maybe 5, 6 months later, he gives me a call out of the blue, and he was like, so we are spinning out these books. Would you like to write one of them? And I was like, absolutely, without question. So that's kind of how it came about.
So you knew it would be Jake centric. Did you know about kind of the father and son angle that it was starting out with?
No, all I knew when I talked to Jackson a couple months later was that they had a name, which was Sons of Star Trek. And he was like, yeah, I guess we want to do something with Jake, and that's why we want you to do it, because we know you like Jake. And Alexander, because they're spinning out of the Day of Blood stuff. But that was it. They had those two characters in that name, and they were like, so you'll still have to pitch to Heather to see, what we can do. So that's what I did. I sent in a couple pitches, and thankfully they liked the one that I liked the most. and just ran with it. So I added the whole QJ element. I added Nog. They wanted Nog too because I was like, "There's no way I'm not going to write Nog. I need to write
Right.
Nog, one of my favorite characters." And then I cheated by putting it in another universe and putting them in Starfleet because none of them were in Starfleet other than Nog. So I was like, I want to write a Starfleet story too. So how can I do that while still being kind of character focused and having these characters grow by the end of it?
But brilliantly done. I mean, whether it was kind of a cheat for you to kind of get a glimpse at their future,
Yeah,
again, brilliantly done because, you know, here Jake is seeing his dad come back after he's been gone for years and now thinking,
yeah,
hey, maybe I don't want to go, to become a creative writer. Maybe I should stay, out here, be a journalist, what have you. Nog with his self-doubts. I mean, we know about kind of the prejudice against the Ferengi is like
yeah,
unintelligent, greedy, what have you. And then obviously Alexander needing to have redemption as well after his role following the Red Path and what have you in Day of Blood, as you said. So I think, you know, who of us didn't have an idea or struggle of who we were going to be, in those formative years and what have you, and to be able to get a glimpse at a possible future. Like, I can't really think of anybody at that age that wouldn't be like, well, you always want to know what your future is going to be, right? Like it's
yeah.
that question. So did the story, once you got the approval for that particular pitch, did the story and the beats, did it fall in place relatively easy for you? Did you have in mind what the growth was going to be for these characters, or was it a little bit of kind of back and forth?
It pretty much fell into place. I think I knew. I think the thing that changed was, and this was something that I was going to do initially, and then changed my mind, and then Heather suggested it, and it ended up being the best thing ever. It was just going to be Jake narrating throughout,
Mm.
and then we switched it to having each issue narrated by one of them, and I think that helps with making it feel more balanced. Like it's not just one person's story. And I think, yeah, it helps us kind of dig deep because, with comics, like there's only so much space on the page. So narration does help just getting inside the characters' minds. And I think the issue that my two favorite issues, I'd say, are two and three, because I think Jake's issues have been at least touched on a little bit in the past. I go a little bit deeper than there's been, but like Nog and Alexander have some really like potent issues that we get to see kind of play out, and I was really excited to explore those things. I was surprised by Alexander because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pull that off, but like I kind of I feel more of a kinship with him now too, like I do with Jake after kind of spending some time with that character and writing what his issues are and how he's going to overcome them and all that. So yeah, I think that was a long-winded way of asking or answering. Like, yeah, I think it kind of fell organically. I'd say.
Yeah, I have to confess to never really liking Alexander
Yeah, I
as a
understand.
character, kind of bratty back in the TNG days, and then so I
Yeah.
wasn't surprised to see him sucked up into the cult. But your Alexander, especially toward the end, like his issue, and then where he gets to, I've had the opportunity everybody to read for already,
Oh,
where he
cool.
gets to in the end, like I've never liked him more. Like you made me like Alexander. I'm
Oh, mission
excited. I'm
accomplished.
excited to maybe see, the path. We don't want to spoil it for everybody, but to see the path that he could take. That's cool that you're like able to take a character that, was on the show, live action, whatever, and you're like
Yeah.
affecting the future of that character, like the canon for that character. Is that a
Yeah.
little humbling?
Absolutely. I mean, this entire experience has been, I know, like I said, I popped them into another universe, but like these four are still the main four, like they're prime universe self. So it's just cool that I got to add a little wrinkle to the fabric of their tapestry, of their canon. Very humbling experience for sure.
Was there a particular one? I mean, it sounds like, you have so much in common with Jake. It was probably easy to write him, easy to get his voice.
Yeah.
Of the other three, was there one that was particularly more challenging than the others?
QJ for sure is the most challenging, but also probably most rewarding as well, just because I think he's such a powerful character like his father, in that he can do anything whenever he wants. So it's hard to skirt around his like invincibility, so to speak. It was easy for me to figure out what I wanted to explore, what was going on internally, but it was definitely hard conveying that within the context of what his powers are and what he does and all that. I think I had fun doing it, and I think I did a good job. But that was the biggest headache I think with writing this series was figuring out how we were going to do that.
Yeah, I could see that. It's kind of like the Superman problem, right? Like he's
Yes,
so powerful. It's like, how do you challenge him?
exactly.
That sort of thing. Well, you've said it a few times, you know, you feel like you cheated to put him into this alternate universe, but at the same time, it's kind of a classic thing that has been done in Star Trek right from the beginning, this whole idea of, you know, mirror universe or whatever. And they seem to be fan favorite,
Yeah.
episodes. So, doing that with this series, um, have you had the opportunity to have fan reaction, what the community, Star Trek community has thought about your series overall, the feedback you've gotten?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to like look stuff up. So like if people tag me and stuff, I'll read it. So yeah, the stuff that I've been tagged in, it seems like people are digging some of the stuff that I'm doing. I had a lot of fun. To this day, I can't believe they let me choose that crew that I chose. I guess being in an alternate universe helped, but I was like, I'm just going to swing. I was like, this is my only thing, my only time that I might be writing Star Trek. I'm going to swing for the fences and just do whatever I want to do. And they let me have that crew. And I was like, this is great. Cause I wanted to kind of take from from what Jackson Collin and Chris did and kind of mixing throughout the canon. And these were some of my just like fan favorite characters that I wanted to just say that I wrote some dialogue for, and they let me do it. So yeah, I think I've seen a lot of people have some fun with some of those characters as well, and yeah, just seeing some of the stuff that I've been doing with the character work, I think people are appreciating that. So I'm happy.
So we know there's a big event coming up next year, for Star Trek, actually starting with 500 in September. Um, can you say, have you pitched any other ideas? Do you have any idea if you'll do
I have
more?
I haven't pitched any other ideas. I can say I am in Star Trek 500.
Yeah.
So I don't think I can say what story I'm doing, but I am going to be in that. Who knows what the future holds? I would love to do more Star Trek for sure. Yeah, it's I hold it near and dear. So,
Would you like to go back to these characters and see where they're at in the
oh
main
yeah,
universe, or
absolutely. Anything, honestly. But yeah, I think charting these characters like would be a really cool thing to do. Like, yeah, I feel like they're family now. Just I spent so much time with them, you know.
one of the other things that Star Trek fans, you know, maybe diehard, I would consider myself a Star Trek fan, but I'm not into this aspect of it as much. But I wonder if it presented a challenge when you're building a story. It's like they have like technical specifications for all the ships and what they can do. Like they really go
Yeah,
into like blueprints and that sort of thing. And we know,
yeah,
for me, I lean into the character first stuff that we were talking about before. The other stuff looks cool, but I know there are people that are fans of it because of, you know, the weaponry and the
yeah.
vehicles and that sort of thing. Your story doesn't get too much into that, but was there anything as far as like what the ship layout would look like and that kind of thing that was, something that you had to do some research on, or was
Yeah, so
challenging?
when I got the series, I bought Star Trek Encyclopedia, which it's from the 90s, so it hasn't been updated with the new stuff, but it's like the official thing that they had. Basically anything that had been in any Star Trek episode up until that point, they had in this encyclopedia. So I bought that just to help me like craft the story, but then like once I actually started scripting, like getting down into like the faux science of it all, that helped quite a bit. Like I'll give you a little tidbit, like the Nog issue 3, Nog's
Yeah.
issue with the engineering thing when he has to fix the engine. When I pitched that, I was like, this is going to be a great issue. And then when I sat down to write it, I was like, oh, this is going to be a hard issue to write because I don't know about Starfleet like engineering.
Right.
So I went to that encyclopedia and that helped quite a bit. And then also we have, you know, we get notes from Paramount about stuff like that too. So like if we're going in the wrong direction, you know, using the wrong torpedo and stuff like that, they'll tell us what needs to be there so it all makes sense, which is great because that stuff's hard.
Yeah, and you want to get it right because you're right. That was immediately what kind of where my mind went when you said encyclopedia. I was like, oh yeah, because you got to look up how
Yeah,
do I recrystallize, you know, dilithium
yeah,
and all that sort of thing. And
exactly.
yeah, it's one of the things that's really fun. And you mentioned putting the crew together, and you know, I was talking to the guys yesterday. It was kind of the same thing, being able to, you know, they talked a lot about this, being able to keep it fresh and do something new that's additive but still have little callbacks and you see characters that you love and what have you. But it's different than the feel of like the 80s DC Star Trek where they almost felt like lost episodes that you were still, stuck in that time frame. You guys are in a different period of time that hasn't been covered in live action. So again, going back to this idea of creating new stories, new canon for new events and character growth for characters that we do know, like Alexander, like Jake. Again, just super rewarding, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So again, it's been fantastic chatting with you, Morgan. Congrats on the series. Everybody, issues 1 through 3 are out right now. Go down to your comic shop, get them, check them out this weekend, enjoy them, because then you'll be ready for issue 4 that comes out next week on July 3rd. And issue 3 does end with a bit of a cliffhanger, almost like a oh shit moment.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. And yeah, as we're winding down here, I'll throw it over to you, Morgan. The floor is yours. Anything you want to share with our audience? You can tease anything you have coming up. Let them know where they can find you on social media. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at Millennial on Instagram and Twitter. That's just millennial spelled with MOE instead of MIL. And yeah, like I said, I'm in Star Trek 500. That comes out early September. That should be fun. Like I said, can't talk about it too much, but just that I'm in it, and I think it's a really ambitious story, but I think it pays off really well. So yeah, pick that up when it comes out. And then the trade for Sons of Star Trek comes out in November. So if you're a trade person.
Yeah, once you've had a chance to check it out for yourself, everybody, it will make a great gift. I think, especially for younger readers, right? Like
Yeah,
teenagers, because again, it's that touch point of trying to figure out who you are, what your future is going to be,
right.
and definitely a must for any Star Trek fan, Deep Space Nine fan of Jake. It's just expertly done. So,
Thank you.
and we'll thank you, listeners, as well. We appreciate you joining us as always, and we will talk to you next time.